Okay.
Hello, my name's Harry. I'm here to talk to you about my plan of action. So I'm going to be covering what got me into radio in the first place, my plan at the start of this course, and we did a presentation like this a couple of years ago, and what's changed over the last 2 years of doing this course, because now where I want to end up is completely different than when I began. I'll also be talking about sustainability and what impact it will have on my career and why it's important. So, how did I get here today? I got the bus. My love of music was what led me to radio. This is my sixth form, Melk Shamoke, and I had a careers meeting, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go to university, and all I knew was that I loved music, really. I liked introducing new artists to my friends. I loved going to festivals and going to gigs and live music. I listened to a lot of Radio 1, especially the evening shows, which were more new music, stuff that people hadn't heard of, not the general pop stuff. And I've been presenting shows like that for the last 3 years on student radio. I started at college back in Wiltshire before doing 2 years here. So that was, when I joined this course, that was my aim, and that's where I wanted to go, is specialist music and a sort of Radio 1 kind of place. So these were my inspirations. Zane Lowe, obviously brilliant for 10 years on Radio 1, presenting new music. Hugh Stevens is in charge of BBC Introducing on Radio 1, so again, new bands that not many people have heard of. And also Phil and Alice was probably my favourite show, the 10 till midnight on weekdays. So I got a job at Nerve doing, every fortnight I had a specialist evening show on Sunday evenings where I'd find unsigned artists. I try and keep it quite local as well, so try and bring up bands in the Bournemouth and Poole area. And I was looking to sort of go into BBC Introducing, maybe in the South Coast, or BBC Introducing in Essex. Not Essex, Sussex. However, over the last 2 years, I kind of lost my motivation by doing these shows on Nerve. I also had a weekly show which was just based on getting as many songs out in an hour as you could. They weren't as interested in your own take on things. This was during the daytime. I presented a show with Ben for a few months, and I also had one before winter. And when it came to FM, I didn't apply for it because I wasn't enjoying the show. It was just basically playing songs that everyone had heard before, and I just wasn't interested in it. Whereas over the last 2 years, we've done various courses and units, and my favourite was doing the journalism course. We spent a few weeks putting out bulletins on the hour. I loved writing up the news, going out and finding it, looking through papers and writing it in a style that would suit radio and suit the demographic that we were looking for. I enjoyed looking up the stories, and yeah, we kept doing this over the 2 years on Aspire, especially writing the sports summary. But I only had a minute, so when we're doing the on-the-hour news bulletins, you've got to get everything into a minute, and I didn't really enjoy keeping it that short. I prefer to talk a lot more about it. So that then got me listening to other radio stations. Obviously, by doing this course, I listen to a lot more speech-based radio now. Radio 4, Radio 5 Live, and some podcasts by Alan Davis and Rob Gilbert, all really interesting. And then over Easter, I had to think about what I really wanted to do in the future and where I saw myself 10 years from now, and just realised that my real passion now is sport. I'm not interested in the music side of it anymore. So I thought, what if I aim for Radio 5 Live? So that's my new target, and that's what I focus this presentation on. And that's going to be my plan for the next 10, 20 years. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about 5 Live. It started in 1994, and it took over from Radio 5. Radio 5 kind of picked up the scraps of programming that weren't really suitable for Radio 2 or Radio 1. There was a mixture of a bit of sport, a bit of children's programming, and some educational stuff. But then, during the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, Radio 4 became a 24-hour news station, and that was really popular. Obviously not with the Radio 4 listeners, because they missed out on all their favourite programming. But a lot of people actually really liked how the BBC did it and how they covered it. So they decided to make a news and sport-based station, which was 5 Live, and it was designed to be 24-hour news all the time, and it became really, really popular. Nowadays, this is the program controller to do for speech radio what Radio 1 is doing for music. So he wants it to be the best speech radio in the country and be a lot better than their competitors. The morning and afternoons are dedicated to the news, and maybe the evenings they cover live commentary of sports, and they also do a lot of phone-ins and people calling in. There's a lot of debates as well. It's not just the presenters giving their opinions, it's all the public bringing in and sometimes having arguments live on air, which is quite enjoyable to listen to. The competitors obviously include Sky and BT, because would you rather listen to the commentary on the radio or would you rather watch it on the television? And obviously the TV rights are going up and up because more and more people want to watch it on TV. So I think 5 Live, they're having to compete with them, and it's possibly really good for people who can't get to the television, who can't afford Sky, don't want to pay for Sky, or if they're driving in their car, or if they're walking around and about, then radio is a really, really good option. But a cool thing is during the cricket, people actually put it on the Sky, but with the sound off, so they can listen to the Test match special, because the radio is such better quality than the actual commentary on Sky. It's based in Salford, unlike most of the other BBC radios. BBC Radio 1 and 2 were in New Broadcasting House. And this was because they wanted to keep it in a close connection with BBC Sport, which also moved up there. And there are a lot of pros and cons to doing this, because the presenters on 5 Live were having to commute all the way up to Manchester, or they would move up there. Not really favourable with a lot of the presenters. So it's quite a risky move for the BBC to move it all the way up there. Yeah. I just mentioned that the sister station 5 Live Extra was brought in because the sport was available on local stations and 5 Live, so they managed to bring in a completely new digital station, 5 Live Extra, to cover even more sport and even more commentary. And now I'm going to have a look at a couple of people that I'm looking for inspiration from, and looking at how they got to where they are today. This is Mark Chapman, who you probably recognise from Match of Day 2, mostly he does, and he did start off in radio. His dream was always to work for Radio 1, so kind of like me, that's what my dream's been for a few years now. And he started off as a continuity announcer on BBC, so I know a lot of research we've done in the last 2 years, you see how people have gotten to where they are. This is another way that someone's got a job on the radio, just literally saying what's coming next on BBC 1 and BBC 2. So obviously he probably got some good contacts from there and spoke to people, because he then became a cricket correspondent for BBC North East Radio, which is quite a massive step. So it shows that once you've got your foot in the door, it's quite easy to talk to people. If you really want to do it, then getting your foot in the door wherever in the BBC is a good link to what you want to do. And from the cricket correspondence, he became Radio 1 sport presenter. So he achieved his dream, and he stayed there for a long time. He stayed there for 10 years, and he was quite a figure for Radio 1. He was well known by all the presenters and did lots on every single show, before eventually landing a presenting role on 5 Live. So instead of just being a correspondent and a reporter, he's actually presenting his own shows now on 5 Live, as well as doing stuff on the TV for BBC Sport. This is Dan Walker, and he does Football Focus, as well as lots of other BBC Sport stuff, such as Wimbledon, World Cups. He does a lot of horse racing in Six Nations as well. And a lot of stuff for that is on 5 Live. It's also on BBC Sport, on the website, online, on iPlayer, and also on the television. And he went to uni to study history, and then he mastered in journalism before writing in to Sheffield's Ham FM, because they were looking for a young sports commentator, and he recorded his voice on an old tape and sent it off, and he managed to get a spot there before getting a full-time job on Manchester's Key 103 FM, and that was 4 years as their sports correspondent, and then getting a job on BBC, again the north part of the country. And he does a lot of TV, like I said, and there's a quote from him: "The truth is that there are many doors that can give you access to the broadcasting castle, like we found out studying this over the last 2 years. Some people start early and work their way up. Some go crazy with the qualifications, like he did. And then there are those who have just had a slow burning passion and eventually realise that any other job isn't good enough. And that last little bit, that's me. That's me realising now that this is what I want to do, and now's the time that I'm really excited to go for it. I'm excited about the prospects in the future. So obviously, one thing to look at was, is 5 Live going to keep going? Is there going to be a 5 Live for me when I eventually get there? And it's quite interesting to look at, because the radar figures show an incredible drop. This was due to, when they moved to Salford in 2011, 3 of their main presenters, which was Sheila Fogarty, Victoria Derbyshire and Richard Bacon, they were their 3 daytime presenters, and they were commuting all the way to Manchester and just didn't want to leave London, so eventually went on and found other jobs. And this had a massive effect, because people in radio don't like change. They want to keep listening to the same people for years and years. So that's why they dropped so many listeners. But their controller, Jonathan Wall, he's still optimistic, even though he thinks, like he said here, they're below where I'd hope they'd be. He knew that this particular radar would be a challenging one when you consider the scale of the 10 AM to 7 PM weekday changes and the increasing competition to our sports coverage. This is TalkSport as their main radio competitor, and obviously with the BBC cuts they can only purchase so many packages, so out of the 7 that are available for the Premier League they only have 4 now as opposed to 7. And one positive that I got from this article I read on The Guardian is that they're trying to beef up 5 Live journalism, so even though they're making cuts and they're losing listeners, as they're losing listeners they're trying to do more and more to get people to listen, so more job opportunities are actually coming up. They're putting more into their programmes and they're offering the Twitter generation, as he calls it, different ways to hear it, much like Radio 1. So that's why there's a lot more now on BBC Sport and online. So they replaced the presenters with Adrian Charles, Dan Walker and Tom Livesey, and they're still going through a transitional period, but they're quite optimistic about its future. So now I need to look at how I will get there. This is a quote from Sarah Sturck, and she presents the golf on Sky Sports. She wanted to be a famous tennis player, professional tennis player, but got injured at the age of 15, so decided that presenting is where she's going to go. So she had some advice, and it kind of goes without saying, I would emphasise doing work experience in as many different places as possible, whether it's newspapers, radios, magazines. Get as much experience as possible, because that's what any employer early on will look at, see your drive and ambition. So this is my plan now. Now that I've decided I want to do sports, I've got to go get the experience in sports. I'm experienced at watching it, because that's all I do pretty much at home, and read about it and talk about it. So now I want to get on to presenting, commentating. If you can see, it's a little job advice website, and it advises a bachelor's degree, which I hopefully have, in broadcasting communications, which sounds pretty much like radio to me. So the experience, to start out as an internship perhaps and work your way up, which I do plan to do. Having strong communications and speaking skills, I hope I'm not doing too bad at that right now. And the ability to improvise and meet deadlines, which again through this course we're learning to do. So next is the experience, and I put an application for Hot Radio saying I'd like to get involved with the sports team, so that's something that I'm looking to do in the next year, spending the summer here living. And also when Nerve get going again in the autumn, I'd like to get involved in their sports team, so I'll get lots of experience under my belt before I leave uni next May or June. And I also took on board what she said about doing lots of different things, so magazines and newspapers. So there's the possibility of the Daily Echo. Obviously Bournemouth going up to the Premier League, so that's going to bring down a lot of sport interest down to Bournemouth. So it's a really good opportunity. And this is a quote from Murray, I can't remember his first name, Ian Murray actually, and he is the editor for the Southampton Echo, and he's talking about the work placements that they offer, and they actually do quite a lot. They're only for a week. He says usually for a week, sometimes two. They're unpaid and provided to give experience to the youngsters. Little if anything they create is used in the paper. It's not the purpose of their time with us, but it's still experience. If I could put 2 weeks at a newspaper, maybe getting a little bit of sport in there, that would look really good on my CV. There's also a lot of local opportunities around here. Capital, who I was going to be on their street team last year, but then had to go into hospital, so I still got contacts, and it's a possibility for this summer. I'm not really sure if I'm going to do it because they want you to be really, really flexible, and I've got a job, and I'm going to see if there's other opportunities first. The Breeze, another local station, possibly need a sports correspondent. But BBC Radio Solent looks like a really, really important step on the ladder. And going from hot, I could get some experience there, put in an application for Radio Solent, and then work my way up to 5 Live, hopefully. There's also Heart South Coast, maybe need another sport correspondent. It's an option, but I'm not really sure. It's not my preferred route, but it's still something there available. And now I'm going to talk about sustainability, because it's important that you consider this, especially with the BBC, because they've got such a reputation, they've got responsibility for their employers to be sustainable and look after the environment, and it also saves a lot of money. So us as media workers have obligations to do this, protecting the environment, save them money, and also to educate others on being sustainable. So if I can show that I understand how to do it and how to be sustainable, then I can advise others and hopefully give me a bit of an advantage. There's lots of things to consider, such as global warming. It can affect the supply chains if you're getting equipment from overseas, and also carbon taxes in other countries should encourage people to purchase locally. It would save the business money if you know how to do this and if you can work around these things, so it makes you a more prospective person to employ. Obviously sports reporting does require travel, so it's easy to say just don't go to the location, watch it on TV maybe, and you'd save travel costs, but that would have a massive effect on the quality of the listenership. So yes, you're probably going to have to go out to places. Personally, I like to do stuff like the cricket, go out to the West Indies or Australia or India and places. So you are going to have to travel out there, and there are ways to keep your costs down, but there's a programme released by the BBC, programmes that don't cost the earth. It's basically a load of ways that you can save the environment by doing, you can save money, you can be sustainable, and there's a lot of stuff in there, and there's a link at the end if you want to go look it up. Basically, you need to be out there because it needs to be live and up to date. If you want to get interviews with the players, then you've got to do it in person. And this little booklet, if you will, it shows how you can inform your teams of being sustainable and how you can educate people. Basically, by starting off by saying, look, we're going to make this a sustainable programme, no one's going to be surprised when you say, we can't do this, we can't have this, because we've got to keep costs low and we've got to keep the environment stable. So I'm trying to show the BBC that I can educate people on how to be sustainable. We've had paper-free programmes and bulletins for about 2 years. This now becomes second nature to read off the screen. I reckon we're saving at least 2 packs of paper a week. That's £300 a year, so that's really, really important that people do this. This is from a journalist on Radio Shropshire. And there are benefits for everyone. There are benefits for the employer and there's benefits for the employee. Stuff like lighting, appropriate room size, air conditioning, and the equipment such as the computers, TVs, DVD players. They're all areas in which sustainability can be achieved, and it won't have an impact on the quality of the broadcast. There's a little checklist. There's one of many checklists actually in this booklet. You can see just how many ways there are to save money and save the environment. So transport, travelling by bike when appropriate, using public transport, car sharing. If your tapes need to be sent off, they can't be sent off digitally for whatever reason. Ask for a low emission vehicle such as a motorbike. Also, if you can do it digitally, stuff like meetings, do them over Skype or a phone call rather than in person. Just little things that we can do. And respect local people and their cultures. When you go to a country, leave it how you found it, basically, is the advice. And if you do this, everyone will follow suit. Why not, when you've done a broadcast and you've completed your programming, tell people about it and get the hype up about being sustainable and get people more into it and educate a lot more people and being proud of what you're doing as well. So my little 5, 10, 20 year plan, I'd like to be on local radio within 5 years. Like I said, Radio Solent, but I'm quite open to moving, and if it means going up north nearer to the BBC, where the BBC are in Manchester, then so be it. I'll go anywhere around the country, and within 10 years, hopefully be at 5 Live. That's the specific objective anyway. This summer is going to be really important for me, especially I'm eager to get out and start learning, putting in loads of applications now, and starting to practice professionally what I already do at home when I'm watching sport on a day. 20 years, so basically in my late 30s, I'd love to just have my own show like Dan Walker does now and Mark Chapman does. Have my own show on 5 Live, and that's the goal basically. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
I like the idea about the echo.
Yeah.
That really might help you personally. I will warn you, I did 2 weeks work experience there and I ended up staying for 24 years. So,
But you loved it.
I did love it, but it just goes to show where work experience can get you. I wouldn't have had the career I had if I had lucked into 2 weeks work experience there back in the late 80s. I went there about 1989, I think it was. I went for 2 weeks, wandered into the editor's office at the end of the 2 weeks. I said, right, give me a job. And he said, actually I haven't got it. But I do know someone that does, because it's a big company. It's a big multinational company. It's owned by another company called Net in America. And he said, I've got a few editors who I know, I'll see if they're looking. Come back in half an hour. He made some phone calls on my behalf. And he pretty much got me an interview at another local company, which I went to for 3 years, came back to the Echo, and that was it, 21 years, bang. So, I think paper thin, especially in sport, and you quite rightly said, with Cherries going up to the Premiership, this would be a cracking year to get some print experience. I'm not in charge of whether you get to hot or not, but I'm glad you considered applying, and they do need sports people. But we won't be covering the Premiership.
No, it's Paul Town.
But Paul Town is an important team for us, so we'll be doing that. But if you could get work experience at the Echo as well, covering Premiership football, that would be superb for you. Whether they stay up for 12 months is the gamble. You could be, even if they go down again, this year, you could get some Premiership football experience. I hate to be pessimistic about Cherries, are going to stay up. But we have to be realistic, they could come straight down. So, the next 12 months for you could see you doing some Premiership football, which would be very good for you. And the only way you're going to do that is on the Echo and not a radio station. Unless you get yourself into Solent, which is another option. But I would think the Echo is not an idea I expect you to come up with. I think it's a good idea. In my personal experience, it can work. But hey, that's just me. Print is something you could look at. Plus, you get to do more online than print, to be honest. The way newspapers go, but you get to do professional sport in a professional environment to real, almost impossible deadlines. So, yeah, well done on that. I've worked for Ian Murray, so I know him reasonably well. I know most of the other assistant groups. So, if you want to drop my name, be my guest.
Okay.
Whether it will do you any good, I don't know.
Might do worse.
Bloody hell, I thought we got rid of that guy.